Welcome to the Dropping Gems con Muchos Colores podcast. I am your host, Arely Lagunas. This is an audio community where we own and share our stories as trailblazer moms, crafting a unique and meaningful work lifestyle, leading with passion, breaking barriers, and chasing bold dreams on our own terms. Celebrating our Latina motherhood voices to bring you genuine insights to the highs, the lows, and in-betweens of working moms from a first-gen Latina lens. We don't have to travel this journey alone. Let's get started. Well, today we're very excited to have a very special guest. Very excited to have Kia with us in our Dropping Gems con Muchos Colores podcast. Kia is born and bred Chicago-Puerto Rican who grew up in Humboldt Park, Logan Square neighborhood. She is a single parent of two children, boys ages 8 and 10, and has worked in various pediatric settings across Chicagoland for the past 12 years. Currently, she is the mental and behavioral health specialist at Donohoe Pediatrics in Chicago's North Center neighborhood. Kia is currently in the last stretch of her doctoral studies to obtain a Ph.D. in child development through Erikson Institute and Loyola University, Chicago. Kia is also the daughter of two retired Chicago public teachers, a very proud boricua with a passion for child life research on the impact and explicit bias and racism on child development outcomes. So Kia, welcome officially to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Arely. It's a pleasure. It's so funny. I think this is like the second podcast I've ever been, asked to be interviewed on. But I remember when podcast came out and I was like, oh, okay. All right. You mean you just talk? Yeah, let's do it. I'm honored to, be this, have this space and be invited in this space among Latinas.
Thank you. No, and for us, it's very important as an audio community to talk about topics that really matter to us, to our Latino community, and especially to mothers like ourselves. So it's our pleasure to have you and use this space for you to educate us and also share a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah, of course.
So one of the things I wanted to mention up front is that, I'm very excited and happy to hear about your journey and also what you're currently doing to see a Latina, a working mom, and someone who contributes to the community, but also is pursuing their PhD degree. So if you want to start off first by kind of sharing where you are with that journey, we would love to hear about that because it is very motivating for our mothers that are listening.
Ooh, you made me emotional. As you were saying that, I was like hearing my abuela in heaven being like, yes, I would say my journey began when I had people in my life who I identified with that reminded me of myself or someone in my family, but somebody who represented my culture and that I wanted to, be like, quote unquote, or aspire to be. And we all have role models, right? When we're little, we look up to people that we might identify ourselves with, or people that we want to look like, or people that we want to, study the same material, or people that we want whatever community they live in, and we want to join them because there's, we all have these kind of idealized views of what we want for our future. And who I identified with the most is my culture, right? My Latina culture, and being a Puerto Rican family is a huge component of that. So I would say my first, this journey is having my mom, both my mom and dad, but my mom is both of us as self-identifying females that, I looked up to her, and she was in college when she had me. She was so young. And then she became a teacher. And after that, she went to grad school. After that, she went to, get another certificate and endorsement, and she just kept going to school. And I just remember always like seeing her view of learning, right? Like on the kitchen, the kitchen table, but also going, Nana, come over here, can you teach me how to open up a file in Microsoft Word document so that I could save it? How do you
Okay.
do this?
Yeah.
So it was great to have like those influences, those people in my life. And then from there, my mom and then my aunt got her PhD. I saw professors that looked like me that inspired me. I was able to relate to people that, just became those in my life that influenced me to work in pediatrics and child development. And it's a bunch of incredible Latina women.
Your community around you, your network, your family, encouraged you in a way or exposed you to, maybe what you would like to do in the future or maybe as an adult, right? And I think that's very important. There's not a lot of representation, right, within the Latina community. So I think that's important how you were able to leverage that, right? I also was getting emotional because I'm a mother too, and I'm a mother of 3, and I could just imagine how challenging it was to, get in this journey. I recently read your Instagram post, about your children. You were just doing mac and cheese meals for your children because that's what you were able to do at that time because you were, concentrating on your studies. And I got a little bit emotional about that because a lot of times we invest in our current present so that in the future you can see all the seeds, right? All the seeds that you've planted for you and your family.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's such a great comparison. It is all of these seeds, right? Like this,
Mhm.
there's all the little pieces that got to, where you are. And sometimes those sacrifices, yes, of corn dogs on Mondays and McDonald's on Friday, and at the same time we're moms in this society or this culture where we're a minoritized group, right? In lots of different ways, gender, class, and culture and race. And so to be a Latina mom and just go, okay, my kids are going to grow up in the society that I grew up in. How can I train them, arm them with all these skills when I can only make corn dogs on Mondays, right? So it's also getting rid of that guilt, like that,
Yes.
they're going to I turn out okay. They're a better version than me, hopefully. But they're going to survive on McDonald's every now and then.
Exactly. And you know what? You nailed it. It's sometimes that guilt that we have. I'm not sure why, right? But you're absolutely correct, right? It's not going to hurt them. Even if we're feeding them, like you said, a fast food, it's not going to kill them, right? So
Yeah, no,
I
for
just,
sure.
I just wanted to highlight, how it's really important for a lot of our Latina community and motherhood community to see others thrive in this environment because there are not a lot of women Latinas who have a PhD. I actually don't even know the statistic, but I know for a master's, it's only 4% of Latinas. So I could just imagine for a PhD what that percentage is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's pretty low. I want to say it's
Yes.
6 or 16. Either way, it's too low.
It's low.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my role models are 2 PhD Latinas, right? And
Oh,
and they were
exactly.
very rare these days.
Yes. So thank you for sharing that. And if you can also share with us a little bit more about your journey working with children and in the mental space. How is that going for you? And especially now in our current landscape where we know that there is a mental health crisis, right? How
Mhm.
has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I could answer that question in my with a parent hat on, and I can
Mm-hmm.
answer that with the professional hat on, and I'll answer both. Mom wise, knowing that children have, been impacted by the pandemic and all the other adverse experiences that are associated with the pandemic, like loss, lack of education, lack of family. Um, that was really hard as a parent to not have I guess, know what the reason is for this pandemic and all these changes, and then not being able to teach my children, to educate them and say, hey, this is why this is happening. And then also this collective loss, right? As a mom and we were losing part of our daily routine. And then as a professional, I was in healthcare, or I am in healthcare. So I never, I wasn't able to stay home. Nor did I want to. I wanted to be out there, fighting the good fight and helping one of our most minoritized populations, kids, right? I wanted to make sure that they thrive. So, I'd be mom virtually, and help with all that other stuff that we did with, schooling. And I had the privilege of having some help and friends as well, and my parents close by. But to see it in all the kids at work, every child was somehow impacted. And it wasn't just that they got COVID, it was complications of the pandemic, right? The accessibility to the racial injustices and the killing of George Floyd and all the senseless deaths, and definitely the exposed health disparities. Children are already a vulnerable population, and so when you add in all the other dimensions, and you say, okay, well, there's gender, sex, these are all the things that may minoritize them in this system, or may not give them the best healthcare, the best mental health care. Are the Latinos were a big population of that group, a lot of Black and brown children. And so, as a mom and of children who are, half Puerto Rican, half Irish, I thought of that too. Contextually, culturally, how did it affect them? But then also the kids that I work with, I saw cultural differences in how the pandemic was affecting children. So that got me really interested to think about mental health and, what are the sources of that is affecting not just the pandemic. The pandemic's one huge thing. It's, vaccinations to wearing a mask to social interactions. But I thought about, okay, so how is it affecting their mental health? Well, it's not categorical. Like there's no way to explain what it is that affects their mental health, because every child was affected so differently.
Yes.
And I think the biggest thing was just fear. I think fear, captured, the hearts of a lot of kids and possibly affected their development. And we got ways to go, but, of course, we've had access to virtual learning, and there's things that we've done to kind of help their mental health access, to psychiatrists and psychologists online. But yeah. And then the biggest takeaway for that, with all the other moms, or just, vulnerable populations in general, is teaching our kids that we thrive, despite all that. So seeing their parents thrive and say, okay, you did good. We got food on the table. Maybe a day we didn't have toilet tissue, but
yes,
but you're alive and well, right? And then we also think about the people that had gone through death and gone through illness and lost their job. So yeah, I would say the biggest impact is empathy. They became more empathetic children, with more mental health issues.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely correct. I think one way that our children, if anything, benefited from this is that, they're looking at their parents and how they're coping with this, or they become resilient by going through these challenges, right? And of course, we all know the negative impact of the COVID. What do you think we can do as parents, right, to help them, in situations like this, right? Coming from a professional like you, like especially for our community, right? We know that in the past, we weren't really exposed, or at least in my experience, we really weren't exposed to taking care of our mental health, just as we would like going to a dentist or going to an eye specialist. So for that community who, we're still new into this, learning about the benefits of mental care, mental health care, what would you say is something parents can do for our children to help them cope? And not only that, but to also have more awareness about mental health?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think my number one hope would be that children are learning a lot in school, right? Like they're learning about mental health, and there's more social emotional learning. So I would say, as parents, just understanding what that social emotional learning looks like, as it, they may talk about mindfulness as a strategy, or, may do an anxiety lesson plan, or, something like that. And then reinforcing those tools at home. Someone has already done the curriculum and the manual for you. So if you're able to connect with your teacher and say, hey, as these issues come up, mental health issues, behavioral health issues in the classroom, how is it helping, Luis, how is it helping Diego? How is it helping Marco? How is it helping, anyone? And then you can reinforce that as a parent for your child's individual needs in your home. But collectively, I would say normalizing that mental health matters, that there's this awareness, this month that we have now. There's, more access virtually and in person than there has been in a long time, and why that is. And then saying the word anxiety. People don't like saying the word anxiety. They think of it as this, they pathologize it. They think of this as like a disorder, right? Oh my goodness, you have a disorder and you have to take medication, and now you're living on medication. That's how I imagine my grandparents thought, right?
Right.
So I think just, saying anxiety 50 years ago to me would have been different. Well, I wasn't alive 50 years ago, but you know what I mean? Back in the day, when our parents were our age, I think, anxiety wasn't really talked about, or, it's fine. You can deal with it. It's fine. And so now that we're talking about it, and there was this huge experience that we all endured, as parents, we can now have this conversation with our kids that says that, it's saying, hey, a lot more people just like you, a lot more kids just like you, a lot more moms just like me are experiencing something called anxiety. And talk at the dining room table, instead of creating and continuing this taboo of, we only talk about that in private. So I would say expose it and normalize mental health symptoms like anxiety, like stress, like, depression.
You're definitely on target. I think we just need to normalize it and talk more about it, so it becomes something very natural to both parents and children. And you know what? One of the things I did notice that I didn't have right in school, and I was born in the 80s, so my children are 7, 8, and almost 12. But what I love about the school now is that they do have, it's called SEL, right? Isn't that what you were referring to? Social emotional.
Yes.
Right? Yes, that's something we didn't have, right? I mean, I think it's so beneficial. I look at their stuff that they get, and I'm like, oh my God, like that is so helpful even as an adult, right? So I love that. So like you said, there's still a lot of work to do, but I think definitely there is more attention to this. Yeah,
for sure.
CDC would say that their data show that 1 in 5 children had a mental disorder, but only 20% of those children received care. And that was prior to the pandemic. So I could just imagine, the statistics after. In your work that you do, would you mind sharing with us a little bit more about the resources that are available to parents and are available to children who are going through this situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, specifically in the Chicago community?
Any resources that someone who may not have been exposed to it could be like, this is a good resource that I can look into and learn more about this, so I can help my child, or, I can, even help myself.
Yeah, no, yeah. Now we get, so there's, it's hard because the pandemic was, I mean, it's still technically kind of going on, I believe, but, it's only been a couple of years. So there's not, too much research and evidence-based material that helps, that helps us specifically about the pandemic. But I think there are great resources that teach us about how to have a conversation about mental health with children. And then, as adults, how to be, a better parent, despite these big events, these big challenging events that affected, child development. And I would say there's two. One, I have a very favorite book. It's called Olivia's Mental Health Day, and it's by Dr. Jasmine Cersei Pate. And it's the first book of its kind that I've seen that has, representation of Black and brown children, having a bad day, or being stressed, or having anxiety, or, the scenario in the scene, there's one where she goes to school and she's explaining her sensories and different sensory inputs in different ways. And when I gave that to my kids, it was kind of unsolicited, like, oh, you want to read something? And one of my colleagues, who's a pediatric psychologist, Dr. Cersei Pate, like, oh, actually, I have a colleague that just read this, or I just wrote this, and they started reading it, and they were like, oh, anxiety, we know what that is. We learn it in school. And I was like, oh, perfect. So this is a great tool that can connect everything, right? It's about a child in school who needs a mental health day. And now Chicago Public Schools, they have a couple of mental health days that you can take, and it's an excused absence. So I would say, any books that have the word mental health in them for children would be great. Unfortunately, there's not many, but any about feelings and anxiety and those kind of things would be great. I'm sure a librarian or at a bookstore can show you a whole mental health section for kids now that people are becoming more aware of it. And then for parents, there's a lot of parenting stuff out there, that you have access to. So I would be careful with social media, but I think some of the really good ones are Dr. Ziggy, Dr. Kennedy. There are a lot of great resources for kind of parenting right now through challenges and behaviors that may have been from attitudes, beliefs and, thoughts about the pandemic.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good ones. Yeah. There's a lot of
Yeah.
really good ones out there.
And I'm glad you mentioned, so for those that are in the Chicagoland area, and I know there are other states that are following some of the initiatives, but you are correct. Last year in 2022, they added 5 mental health days in Illinois under a new law, right, for public schools. So definitely that's a good step, right, towards having more awareness and more normalizing, right, that is important to address mental health around the country. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I believe it's Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, and Nevada that are currently doing that. So I am hoping we can hear, at some point have all the states do that as well.
The globe. That's amazing.
Right.
I thought it was just Illinois. This sounds better to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but you're right. It should be really globally, right? Not just in the US. So
we got to give kids a break.
Yes. Yeah, no, thank you for that. My other question to you is, I know that even though your background has, is, I think what you're doing in the community, by the fact that you are this is your career, this is what you do as a professional. I'm sure that even as a professional, you also have to find ways so that you can fill your own cup, right? Especially because you're a mom and you're a daughter. So how do you fill your cup? That's one question. And 2, what do you enjoy to do the most with your kids?
Ooh, I think that I can answer those 2 questions in one. The more time I spend with my children, that's been a good thing, right? Like they humble me, really, really spending time with them and going, wow, they are a part of me and I get to teach them. Wow. I would say that's something that has been, very soothing for me, is to spend more time with my children. But then there's those times that you don't want to, right? Because they're being brats. But if you ever hear this, Diego and Marco, mommy loves you. If it's hard. I mean, of course it's going to be different for everybody, but I have a therapist myself. I have normalized mental health, right? So I've had a therapist for the past 5 years, and yes, I've used her more since the pandemic. So yeah, having, I'm not afraid to say, something that was once taboo, like I have a psychologist. I have somebody that I talk to every 2 weeks that helps me navigate the hard times, but also makes me feel less guilty about some choices as a parent as well, as a partner, as a family member, as a daughter, as a friend. So definitely, I would say that, definitely being able to express myself with the therapist. And then another thing too is there's just something to be said about nature. I mean, I live, because of the pandemic, I was at the park more often, right? And I was outside and with the trees and noticing the birds and noticing all these different blooms that popped up. And then I became really interested in plants. And so now, horticulture is really big for me, just the study of plants and planting. And I have a garden room I created upstairs. And so that's kind of my go-to, because plants don't talk back to you.
That's great. Yeah. And that is a true fact. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audio community about your motherhood journey and how that has been going for you? And if there's anything that has been challenging, like a challenging aspect of motherhood that maybe you didn't really learn until you were in the trenches, right?
Ooh, how much time do you have? No. Gosh, I would say, I think it's such a privilege to have your patients and family, or I'm sorry, parents and your family in your community. I have the resources here in Chicago. My mom and dad are both here. I have aunts and uncles and cousins. And so I think I mentioned this in one of my other answers, like it is a very collective response to, from the child's mental health needs to me as a mom, as a student, and as a single parent. When I have my kids, I can't juggle all those things. Right. So just having the support, even a friend at the end of the day that could just take the kids for a couple hours, or, you have the pleasure of your mom and dad still living on this earth side and being able to, contribute and take care of the kids. That's wonderful. If you don't have those resources, I think finding other moms, finding other Latina moms, an effort just like this with the podcast, but finding other people that have, you identify with, right? And not paying attention so much to books and research and Dr. Google, because you will go down a path of, guilt that not every mom does it the same way. But if you can, narrow it down to the advice that you're receiving or the guidance that you're receiving, that it comes from someone that you relate to, that shares the same values and morals, that you're trying to instill in your own children and that you receive from your own family. It goes a long way, right? Because we can have somebody like a teacher or, one of their babysitters or even a friend down the street not have those same values, those same morals, those same, family traditions and cultures. And it's nice for the kids to even see that their mom looks like another mom, right? Or that their kids look like other kids. Somebody that comes to mind is a mom who is 100% Puerto Rican. I am 100% Puerto Rican. And I met her a couple months ago and she has 2 kids. And I was like, you do that too? Oh, I use this word. I use that word. Right. And it just it just makes you feel more normal. Right. Especially being a part of a minoritized community.
Yes.
In Chicago.
Yes, it's important. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I'm going to go back a little bit to our beginning conversation, how you mentioned that, your mom was a role model to you in your journey. And now as a pediatric mental and behavioral health specialist, was there a moment in your childhood or upbringing, where you were like, wow, this is what I want to do, right? At what point did that happen in your lifetime? How you were able to choose this journey for you? That's one question. And then the second part of that is, what contribution do you want to leave for the future generations?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say, let me think about this. My mom, seeing her as a student while I was being raised was very influential. because I always wanted to go to school, and then her becoming a teacher and working in a school. I grew up in that learning environment. And then seeing my mom happy, right? Like not only, as a professional, but as a mother, as a friend, as a sister, she found a lot of joy in her, in what she did for a living, who she was. And I think that was probably one of the biggest, influencers is I wanted to be like my mom. I wanted to be like my mom, especially because I feel she was, the first generation in her family to go to college, and she inspired me. And then working with kids, I saw her work with kids. I lived, with her, and then almost under her desk when she was grading papers, when I was, when I was chiquita. So that, seeing my mom in a professional way change the lives of children is answering your second question too, is when I saw that the difference that my parents as teachers can make in the lives of children, despite them having their home community and, things outside of school, the big influence that a teacher can make, right, on children. So that was, but I knew that I wanted to teach the teachers and not the kids. So I always wanted to be a professor who taught people who worked with kids, because I remember those people being really big influencers in my mother's life when she was in school. So that teaching capacity, that is where I got that from. And then working with kids, I just remember seeing my dad with kids. He was so good. He's a teacher as well, just how well he, kind of helped empower the next generation. And that influence, I mean, that is what a gift to humanity, right? Is to tell a child and to teach a child to just be a good human at the end of the day, no matter what you believe. So I would say those two things, seeing my mom as a student, but, and, kind of that journey towards a professional, and being like, all right, if my parents can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, I actually love also the education. And when I was in second grade, I had a great teacher, and I wanted to be like her. I said, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. I didn't become a teacher, but I do a lot of education in HR. That's my background. And I believe that that's part of the reason why I love, the HR aspect, is because we do provide the education. And often, we do have to, teach others. And kind of like how you were saying, I may not necessarily be teaching kids, right? But I'm working with adults, right? So I thought that was interesting. When you were a child, do you recall wanting to be a teacher like as early as a child, or it was more like towards more in a teenager, that type of era? I know you mentioned you were working side by side with your mom when she was grading papers, so I'm curious to know what age that was.
Yeah, I mean, I was born with my mom as a student in college, becoming a teacher. So it was even before becoming a teacher, she was a student teacher and did, volunteer work and things like that. And I just always saw her working, and then being home and being humble and modest, and, still kicking her feet up and taking care of herself.
Yes.
So when what age I think I was like, okay, aspire to be something, I would say probably third or fourth grade, when, you start thinking a little bit more abstractly, you start thinking about metaphysically things outside of, your control, and that there's a really big world out there. The moment you understand that, kids understand, oh, there's opportunities outside of my home and my community.
And now that you're an adult, you're a mother, you're a professional, is there anything you want to share with the audio community about your journey that you feel that maybe it will be helpful for the community?
Yeah, I think just being very aware that we are our worst critic. We really are. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that, as Latina moms, as women, as a minoritized group, that we're whether you have a partner or kids, or you're a roommate of someone, that you're the one that tucks yourself in at night. right? You're the one at the end of the day that's in bed with your thoughts. And those can be really overwhelming as a mom because you feel there's guilt and there's, all the mac and cheese I made and I should have made something else. And, you hear the other mom going, oh, well, I didn't do that, or I didn't do this. And really understanding that you can be authentically yourself and still be a really, really good mom, and not comparing, or critiquing how you're doing compared to other moms. There is no universal way to be a mom except to make sure your kids survive, right? That they eat and sleep and learn. So yeah, I would say, that aspect of just self-love and how, going inward and really being aware and mindful of who you are as a mother, what you want to instill in your children, and not going outside of your comfort zone to find this idealized, fabricated, perfect mother scenario. It no longer looks like that anymore. 60 years ago, people may have said, oh, I want the husband and wife and a house and the nuclear family with 2 kids and a dog. And here I am living proof that you can still be happy and be a single parent and have come from a different family, and, not have 5 kids and, go to school. And so, again, being authentically yourself, being okay with who you are and approving of who you are, and surrounding yourself with people that lift you up.
I love the message about self-love, right? Being authentic and, not comparing yourself to, what maybe society says it's the expectation, right? We all have our own journey in motherhood, and that's completely fine, right? So I love that message, especially because, this month is such a great month to remind everyone about mental health awareness. So I love the message that you just mentioned right now. And I want to really thank you for your work, for your specialty and contribution to the community. My limited research that I understand about the Latino community is within mental health is that, a lot of times there's a lot of language barriers, there's, less access to healthcare, and sometimes cultural, influences that keep Latinos from getting help, right, with mental health. And then there's all these unmet mental health needs. So your work is truly important and essential to bring more awareness and normalize mental health care. So I just want to say thank you. And it's such an honor to finally have an opportunity, to connect through this platform and have you as a guest in this month in particular to honor Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is a really important topic, and I'm just really appreciative that, that mental health does matter, but you're also acting on it, right? And sharing this perspective and finding people that can help others. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want to share our good humanity.
Yes,
So yes, I completely agree.
Yes. So I appreciate the conversation and dropping these gems, right? That's part of the reason of our title for our podcast. And I wanted to invite you, if you want to share with our community any tools that parents can have, to help our children in the mental space, or if they want to learn more about your work, if you don't mind sharing that with our community.
Yes, absolutely. I would say there's a couple just making sure that the resources that you get, whether it's a book or an article, that you look at who the author is and their background. The old saying, when your parents say, well, don't get any advice from somebody that you don't want to be in their position, right? It's very similar. It could be a pharmaceutical company that wrote the article or the book or whatever. So doing your research. There's a couple books that I would recommend. One is The Body Keeps Score. And that is a really good one to understand how your child and mind and body connection all kind of work together. It normalizes mental health and it explains it in a way that you could also explain it to your child. And then another one is Raising Lions by Newman. And there's a series with Dr. Dawn Hubner. And these are all people that have, studied children for a very long time and have, a really good set of tools and skills that you could use to boost and improve your child's mental health and behavior. So those are two really great resources. I think in Chicago itself, like I would say that, people still read magazines and still read newspapers and social media. And I think like things like this, right? Like getting on podcasts and writing articles and being heard, right? Like publish, keep writing, get your word out there, your story out there. And then lastly, if you want to follow me, great. I'm on Instagram. It's not it's a professional kind of nature public account that's not really tied to any business per se, but it has my work there and my information, and you're welcome to message me. And every now and then I drop some tiny gems in 4x4 squares. So it's my tag is at Kia, my first name, so KIA _ my middle name, which is Lee, LEE _ Ferrer, F as in Frank, ERRER. So at Kia _ Lee _ Ferrer. And shoot me a message, or if you have any questions or anything like that, I'd love to support you and support this podcast.
Thank you. And the last wish for us, for me and my community is we want to wish you the best, as we know that you are in your last stretch of your doctoral studies. And we want to wish you the best. We want to hear about the celebration, because it's something very well deserving to be celebrated. So we can't wait to hear when it's, when it's officially.
Yes. Part two. Thank you. Yes. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
No, we can't wait to celebrate, another Latina in the PhD space.
Woohoo.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Dropping Gems con Muchos Colores podcast. We have a new episode every month. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave a review and subscribe so you don't miss a beat. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.